So we're up and recording. So
oh no, what do I do now?
yeah, based on the comments yesterday about how to get into the flow, I mean, it's still being, I find it easy getting in the flow when I'm programming, actually. You know, this is just something that comes naturally to me when I'm
Getting into what, Troy?
in the flow. Like we're
Oh, the
talking
flow.
about, kind of
Yeah.
channeling or just letting things happen, and whether it's writing words on a page or, taking a walk. Short ring.
I'm not answering it.
And yeah,
It's for the
but
robot.
being able to do it. So what I've put the challenge to myself is to let words flow onto a page as they're coming to me, and just write.
Oh, that's the simplified version. Attaboy.
Yeah, and based on what you guided me yesterday on how to do it, I've been the main thing that I picked up was, okay, just write until you got nothing to write, and then go back up and then find something. Oh yeah, now I can write about that. So I've been doing that, but yeah, still it is taking practice, of course. I'm still working my way to letting that happen together
Rome
with
wasn't built in a day.
yeah.
So they say. I don't know.
So I've got a little bit more on what I read yesterday, and I'd like to just see how it sounds.
You're center stage, man. I'll shut up and write scathing and harmful notes.
I'm not sure if I should start at the beginning or where I left off.
Why don't you start where you are?
Okay, I'll start off with the new stuff. Yeah, a small recap. Troy is not a plant. When the not a plant Troy was given a small bag of marbles on his 5th birthday, he was destined to become a data scientist. For the next 3 years, Troy was obsessed with marbles. Troy would spend endless hours sorting them all into type, size, color. Cat's eyes, beach balls, milkies, stompers, cokies, galaxies, and steelies. Why did that single cell organism engulf another? Did it wish to be more? Scientists have found that brainless single-celled organisms are capable of solving mazes and even learning. Do we need a brain to do what comes naturally? Young children sit at a piano and do what comes naturally. The brain in some way inhibits the natural way of living. The brain overthinks it, filters it, regulates what we do. Brainwashed by the current broken and rapidly deteriorating world. The brain is needed, but sometimes needs to switch off and just let things happen carelessly. Monks spend days creating beautiful artworks using colored sand only to let the wind blow it all away once it is complete. Do they not care? I understand it is a reminder that nothing is permanent, but do we really have to rub it in our face all the time? Is it something that is required to be repeatedly beaten into our skin until we become numb to the beating? Is it about becoming numb or about enhanced feeling? An enhanced feeling of joy. If you cannot feel joyful about something that is happening, do what you can to change it. If you cannot change it, then accept it. Do the monks feel joy when seeing weeks of work blow away in the wind? As a young boy, Troy let his love of marbles blow away in the wind. The impermanence of marbles in his life made a space for something else. When Troy was 11, he fell in love with the most beautiful girl in his classroom. Sonia was a vibrant, effervescent bundle of blue eyes, long curly mouse blonde hair, white skin, and a smile that never disappeared. That's where I'm up to, other than notes.
No, you stopped again. You know, I just settle in. It's like a feather bed, you know, when you start telling stories. And you have, you know, your voice is different than most people. And I guess it's you know, something about the Australian
Sure.
and whatever, but you've got a cadence, you know, a way, you know, like marching soldiers or horses on parade. And it's very enjoyable. I like it. You know, I noticed some undertones of Buddha, right?
Mhm.
In there when you were talking about what was it, saving something or not killing something. But I also wanted to ask you, since you were 5, you've
Mhm.
spent the rest of your life so far losing your marbles.
Yes, it's a good point. He
Yep.
lost-
That's
lost
okay.
his marbles.
You might try and you know, see if they're falling out here. Could be.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And then there's this. You were saying something about numb, and I was thinking comfortably numb.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
We have become comfortably numb. So we're going to have to put you and Roger together,
Mhm.
right? And see what that produces. And then I denoted something that I principally haven't noticed about you before that came out in your words. And that is a sense of possessiveness.
Mhm. Okay.
You said that is almost like a validation. Did I see or feel some possessiveness on your part? Because in daily life, you know, and just chatting with you for 5 years,
Mhm.
I would never have thought of that. But this is the first time I've heard you express what I heard was a sense of possessiveness. Are you possessive?
Well, I heard that come up. I'm not sure whether it was yesterday or a few sessions before. We're talking about being obsessed and possessed.
Obsessive.
Yeah,
Possessed. I remember. Obsessed.
possessive.
Yeah, hung up.
So
Yeah. I'm sure there's not a hanger hook on top of your head, is there?
I
Troy's
think-
got hang-ups. Nah, 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 nah. Keep talking.
always I mean, definitely being obsessed with something. You know, I've got experiences where I can't think of anything else. And that first story, I guess, with the marbles is an example of that. And you know, I think perhaps there's a fine line between obsessed and possessed. Possessed being, you know, possessive with something, or, you know, nothing else matters.
That's a sense of loneliness. When I hear you speak that way, right? That you hold on to what you have so possessively, so desperately, because you're afraid to lose it. Because if you lose it, either you're not going to get it back or make new ones, or I don't know, a sense of loss is creeping over that somehow. I don't know if that's where you're going, but.
Yeah, so I guess, you know, it comes out in that story, I guess, with the monks in the wind blowing away their artwork. If they weren't possessive, I mean, they have to not be possessive to let
Wait a
that
minute, let me
happen.
ask a question. I beg to differ. You call it artwork. What do they call it? It's a mandala, right?
Yeah.
Mandala.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What do they call it, and why do they do it?
Sure.
Because first of all, it's the story about the three little pigs, right? One of them built his house on sand.
And straw. Straw sticks and bricks. So
Yeah, the third pig was German.
well,
Why do they, you call it art? I think that's what you see. And I'm just curious if you have some other information about how they see it. Have you watched this, obviously? You watch these people do these sand drawings?
I haven't seen it in real life.
No?
No.
Because the Navajo do that too.
Right.
We should put them together.
Yeah, I think it's a message of impermanence is that everything changes, and to be able to allow things to just blow away in the wind, because they are anyway going to be gone. Everything will be gone. It's the same. I think you mentioned in your readings, this too shall pass.
That's great comfort for me many times.
That's right.
Just sit and wait.
So my kind of angle and what came out in that piece is, do we need to cause extra reminders that this will pass? This too shall pass? Because yeah, the question is
it a rhetorical question?
Well,
or are you looking for some response?
I think it's in some ways it's just rhetorical. It's just a question that I'm throwing over in my mind as this is coming out and I'm writing it down, is that because when things blow away in the wind, and a lot of things have blown away in the wind in my life, there's some sense of loss there, and there, with that sense of loss comes a sense of, well, a level of emotion, and I can accept that. I cannot change that, but it's still something that I wouldn't wish upon myself again.
Let me ask you a question, if I may.
Sure.
Are you responsible for the loss?
No. Well, that's like being responsible for the wind. Well,
I would like to have that power.
I guess in some
Travel
ways,
around in a tornado.
yeah. With the the climate change and all that, we are causing certain changes in the wind, but it's ultimately out of our hands.
That's like Trump says, it's weather. I don't know, I've become highly skeptical because of, the way the media is managing things. And for one of the reasons that I came to this house was because to be in touch with nature, and not to Google the weather, right? But to be out in it, because I've noticed every single time I go to Google for a weather forecast, they are totally wrong. I mean, if you want to know what the weather is, walk outside, right? Because there's some planning necessary from time to time, but I don't know, I'm back to nature kind of guy at this point in my life, right? Because all that artificial stuff that people who live in this agricultural area have witnessed a total dependence on our agriculture, cotton, tobacco, soybeans, things like that, and tenant housing, tenant farmers, sharecroppers, which were all just, exploited. Or you could look at it a different way, that these people were, they chose it. And Nelson and a few other old boys who stayed home from the war, Second World War, were quite wealthy, had all the girls and all this sort of stuff, while all the rest of the boys were away. And people were totally dependent on the weather, which they didn't forecast, unless it was Granny and her knee, right? Or I don't know, what are some of the other ones that we hear about? Fuzzy worms, or fuzzier than they were last year. And, birds are nesting early. I was never able to put it together, but it's nice, fun stuff. And I think that we've lost touch. And it's kind of like, it's like an addiction, right? Okay. I don't watch TV. Matter of fact, very short time in my life, I ever watched TV. Because I tell people, they say, why don't you watch TV? And I said, because when I watch TV, nothing gets done. Right. And my brain is powdered by all this nonsense. And it's just like, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Not interested. Of course, I'm highly dependent on the internet. It's convenient, right? It's informative. What kind of information? I don't know. I posted on LinkedIn. It's like, I decided I don't need the media. I'm going to think for myself. And that's how I feel. It's like, when I listen to the media, I just get totally confused, right? And I want to get back to basics and sit or walk around in this environment. And it's not something that Lena can do. She's got, we've got a flat that's overlooks a huge park, and trees are beautiful from the 5th floor, that kind of stuff. And but she can't go out and take a leak on a tree like I can. And that's, I don't know what that's worth, because guys who had a beer or two and are between the subway and their home look upon bushes in a different way than she does, right? But it's some of that stuff that you're hashing over creates this kind of vision, when, and I don't know, maybe I'm just stilted. Maybe I'm like the old man that we called an old man when I was growing up. Well, when I was young, it's like, can I get out of the car? But I don't know what's happening to me. But I'm placing different values on things. I've been here for quite some time. As the Hazayan, as the owner, or steward, better word, right? And now I noticed today, fall is coming, that there's a kind of quiet in the air, right? It's like it's not a dead quiet, dead silence, but it's like nature's not stirring. The cats are running around. They're the same color as the leaves. I can be standing right in front of them and don't see them. Those kinds of things that I'm relating to. Yeah, the flat, Lena was giving me a video show of what's happening in the flat, keeping me up to date. Doors are installed now, things like that. And she's done a fantastic job. She's a fantastic person. And I took a moment, I was pausing and grinding, and she said, well, what do you think? And I told her principally a bit of the story I just told you. And then she said, no, what do you think about this place? And I said, it's cosmopolitan. This place is nothing, not anywhere near cosmopolitan, right?
Sure.
This is like Japanese minimalist in the shadow of Mount Fuji. It's like, okay, you know what you can do here, right? And all it's missing, of course, I have a broken down old truck one day, 1956 or something like that. People are always wanting to buy it, but it's like, no, someday I'm gonna. Yeah, sure you will, but I wouldn't drive the thing anyway. I like the new Jeep. So it's retrenching, and I'm happy to hear your story. It's very thought provoking. It's reminiscent, and I think, what do they say? I don't like the expression, but there's no other I can think of right now of being back to the future, or reliving the past, or like they do in Switzerland, a little town called Solothurn. I used to live there, and Romans built it, and it's like Florence. You walk down the street and it's like, ugh, this is horrible. Well, open those doors, right, and you'll see a totally different Florence. Right. And it's just like in Solothurn, they kept the outside appearance looking well, and then you walk in and it's like, well, I think they do that. They keep the fronts of buildings, in some cities, and then build around it. They have ordinances. And then it's like, Mamma Mia, this is like, computer heaven, or the finest restaurants or whatever. So they've been able to keep that reference to the past as they worm around on the inside. It doesn't seem to have done them any harm, and they're not, from my perspective, and they still have maintained a love of nature. They're not like the United States, where you're 5 years old, knock it down, let's build something new. It's like horrible mistake. And it's comfortable, because you've got the best of both worlds, I think the expression is.
Sure.
And I what does they say? Humans go where angels fear to tread, which I think is, an area that you were talking about of almost fear factor, right? Of wondering what's going to happen. How do I control it? What happens if I don't have enough money? And those kinds of thoughts, that kind of thinking, I think keeps us where we are. And when in fact, if we, and I think you mentioned this in your read, is that if we try to hang on to something, right, or try to adjust to what's going on around us, the universe will run flat over us. It's like, it's better. I think we do what we do principally to make ourselves feel like we're actually having some kind of an effect. And it's like, I don't think so. Thump thump.
That's right.
Thump thump. No, you're not going to learn, are you? Well, you learn when you're beat half to death. Then you start to learn. It's like, okay, all right, I'm not fighting anymore. Just going with the flow, man.
Yeah, that's right. I think, well, going back to that question, like, do we need that? I mean, I imagine those monks feel nothing. Maybe, a new monk who came in and was like, and this is where I was thinking of writing it in the story, like, or bringing the analogy in somehow. So a monk says, actually, I'm not going to let this blow away in the wind. I want to keep it, and stands up against all the other monks and says, don't open those doors, and gets obsessed or possessive over the sand. This took me awake, and write it into some sort of funny story.
That would be a great story.
Yeah,
very simple.
That's right.
You start doing the mandala, and then in the end it's gone, but there's a story in between.
That's right.
I love it. That's great. That'd make a great story.
So yeah, whether that monk is new and hasn't built up the numbness yet. And this is where I'm playing with the numbness versus the enhanced feeling, letting it, yes, okay, whether they do feel sad, watching it blow away in the wind and just accept that, and that's fine, or it means nothing to them. Yeah, they don't feel any emotion when they see such, you know, a symbol of beauty and enlightenment disappear, or they yeah, whether this guy has been doing it for so long and just, yeah, letting it go, but all of a sudden something changes and he's like, actually, I don't want to see it go. So yeah, I can see two angles, like someone who's never experienced it before and they're going, no, I got to keep this, or someone that's been time and time and time again watching it, but all of a sudden they go, you know what, I'm going to make a change, or try to make a change.
That's like the seasons. You know, you heard of Xerxes putting his throne on the seashore, right? And commanding the waves to stop.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of like another story would be demanding that the seasons don't change.
Sure.
Kind of in line with, you know, the emperor that has the emperor's new clothes. I never quite got why that story hangs around, you know, and they use it, I think, principally because nobody really understands it, you know, and then well, it's like the emperor's new clothes. And, oh, yeah. And it's like, what does he say? I never got that story. We're getting dumber and dumber, I think. Nice movie, by the way. May I read something of mine to you?
Yeah.
I hesitate, and I've hesitated all day because, well, I'm digging pretty deep here, and I'm not sure. I've edited it twice, but I'm not sure that it makes any sense. So, well, actually, nothing I say makes sense, which is good. You need to manage something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Message coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk.
Ready?
Yeah. I'm back. Sorry.
Can I see your ticket stub, please? All right, I'm going to start it. I had a third yesterday. I added 2/3, so I'm going to skip the middle third and go to the last third because it starts with the Buddhist. The Buddhist forgets time in meditation, seeing beyond its veil as he becomes one with it through the cessation of thought, which is directional, unperceived, unless we introduce our element suggestively, time. The measurement of movement is not some objectification. It is just seen that way, formatively, as a matter of habit and convenience. If you see it that way, your life goes one way. If you see it another way, life goes another way. Time is a marker, a ripple like zero. Space, too, is an illusion created by movement. Here one moment, there the next, like a film, which is a prerequisite for existence, a form of effortless realization, a pinpoint on a vast field of subjective reality of concentration. We materialize as a result of, who knows? We are but a thought, created by a concentration within a channel, a tunnel, a pathway in an endless journey of timelessness, possibly a wormhole. Within that, we view the walls of the cave, as Plato suggests, with the shadows dancing, as we view not the source of illumination behind us, There is where we must focus. Like a deer staring into the headlights, we must bypass the route we have taken out of ignorance, which is illusion. We, as a concentration, are materialized, or so we believe, and occupy a place in space-time as a particle, whither a wave. Have we viewed a wave or a particle as a perceptual illusion or as a life created from our thoughts? Have we, in thinking, given credence to the existence of a life we create in observing it? Like Schrödinger's cat. It does not exist until we acknowledge it, observe it. It follows then, in quantum mechanics, Schrödinger's cat is a thought experiment that illustrates a paradox of quantum superposition. In the thought experiment, a hypothetical cat may be considered simultaneously both alive and dead as a result of its fate being linked to a random subatomic event that may or may not occur. That's us. Furthermore, in Schrödinger's cat experiment, the unfortunate kitty, figuratively us, represents a quantum particle. Since the cat is unobserved until the box is open, the cat can be in a superposition of dead and alive, awaiting creation, as it were, until the box is opened, at which point it will either take the state of being dead or alive. In the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, the cat is simultaneously dead and alive. We cannot, or we do not, view our lives from the proper position, as it were, but in reverse, like we are the particle in observation, our attention being interpreted as our life. When we may see things from the particle wave point of view, fire's energy point of view. Like the saying goes, if everyone is drunk, then there's no such thing as a drunk. And it goes on and on and on.
Wrote that today.
Yeah. Well, I transcribed it for voices in my head. What did you say? I'm sorry, Troy. What? Not out there. You did. He's inside. So, and it's just, just following the train. That's some really interesting stuff down here. I just would rather, because there's a time or two, I hit a tripwire and it's like, what did I mean there? Because I'm not thinking while I'm writing, right? I'm just writing, trying to stay up with it. And, that's pretty good feat if in one hand I'm holding the phone and in the other hand I'm using one finger.
Really? That's amazing. Yeah.
It's like, the speed with which I transcribe it is the speed of the thought in my head.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, A, B, C, D, E.
Wow.
It's a wonder it gets recorded at all.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel one last thought is that I feel that when I'm doing this, even though we've talked about it before, I did not go into it thinking to substantiate what I'm going to say. It's sort of become like a subconscious control panel, right? Because I think about something, but I don't think about something else, right? And I don't think about them both at the same time, even though they could be simultaneously alive and dead, right?
Sure.
And that is, you can take it with you. That, and I don't want to really address the material aspect of succeeding in this, but I think if I can come up with, which is what I ended up realizing that was what I was doing, come up with eternal life. Let me read you the last paragraph of this. I'm skipping stuff in between. Yeah. Wait a minute, I have to start somewhere. Not every question deserves a response. No answer is an answer too. If we engage, then we will follow. Answers are markers of where we are in our relationship to other sources of information. A disclosure for sure, a map, a GPS reading, or our accumulation of weighty baggage, which is to say experiences that are contextually outdated and irrelevant to where we are in that matrix of space-time, which is the marker of where we are in historical terms, a gravestone, as it were, like a reference book without direct accessibility to the information it stands for. From here, a moment frozen in time, we see the laboratory experiment so closely that we cannot see the forest. No objective conclusiveness. From down the road we go, we have another position from which we can make sense of things in hindsight, or a position of collective objectivity we commonly call the past. Then in context, we can see what those past moments' significance is in relation to the cumulative gathering up or logic, the logos of memory, which is to say our association in relation to where we have arrived, albeit temporarily, momentarily, or in referencing our level of awareness or subjective triangulation to references cataloged and weighty to our lightness. Nietzsche refers to gods as being light on their feet with the ability to dance, extinguishing our ability to exist, a continuous unfolding and ever-present moment, in Jean Gebser's words, by being dragged down by obstacles and references to events that no longer exist, but have transmuted and are merely reconnaissance imaging that has been allowed to remain restrained in movement artificially. Define change and blow out the windows with the strong winds of movement, which measured in time need be bathed in a cleansing agent called death in preparation for a rebirth or repositioning of critical mass. This happens continuously, and to freeze something in time is to cease its movement and cause it to be immutable, unchanging, and therefore eternal because of its lack of dissipation.
Mhm.
So I'm waltzing up to, or so it seems, a point where, you know, I've mentioned a wormhole or whatever. Are there other things too? We create everything around us, not the other way around, you know? I think that's the mistake. We think that we have been created by nature. I would say that everybody lives in a different world because we create our own worlds, right? So with the blink of an eye, you can change your world. And that means also with a different kind of reckoning, right? Where we accumulate so much crap in our whole lives that what do we try to do before death is to get rid of it all. It's not a matter of having it or getting rid of it. It's a matter of recognizing its effect on us. Because, you know, I went out and I bought, I don't know, this thing, right? Because I needed it, but I don't really need it anymore. I'm happy it's around because, you know, I've got something I want to do with it tomorrow. But all of that gathering up, that logos, doesn't make me want to keep it because it served its function. Right?
Yeah.
And so have I, or so will I.
Mhm,
And if I can make that leap to viewing the change in a way in which I, whoever I am, that eternal part of myself that travels, that is indestructible, right? That doesn't need memory. It's principally the less you remember, then you know, it's part of the cleaning process.
mhm,
You
mhm,
use the body up. It was, you know, thanks a lot. I think I'm buying a new car now
mhm,
or
mhm,
something like that, right? Or over here, we don't use cars, we use horses. And it's like, okay, well then, we're by necessity or whatever. And we are limited by our ability to conceive.
mhm,
And if we could, I believe this strongly, think differently, which is, I think, evident and obvious, then you can have whatever you want, even in that transition between life and death. I don't know, of course, that's what I'm striving for, is
mhm,
to give people some sense of eternal life, but not in the
mhm,
Christian or the monotheistic point of view,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
That actually, the whole theory that as I understand it, is that which does not change is eternal.
mhm,
That's how they relate to God, right? Which is, you can't put a name on it because then it's, you know, it's in form and it's limited. And so you can't refer to God by name. No, I think you can, because I think God is a fabrication, right? For some use among humans, if you want to call them that.
mhm,
But we get to that point of through which all of those different philosophies guide you. And I think they guide us towards the slave ship. Right? Sorry, buddy, that's what life's about. Grab an oar,
mhm, mhm,
right? And then we'll dump you out somewhere else and get some fresh guys. What happens to you? Who cares?
mhm, mhm,
But if we think about the right stuff, and I don't mean, you know, parables and stories of dead men who we for some reason or another emulate, thinking that, you know, they went up to the heavens in a flying saucer, which makes a hell of a lot more sense than, you know, this kind of stuff in a sunbeam sucks me up. Okay, I watch Star Trek from time to time too, right?
mhm, mhm,
But I'm looking for a way in which to give people that relief, myself first, and I can share it after that.
mhm,
But this is just like wandering in the wilderness. You know, Jesus, you ain't the only one, right?
mhm, mhm.
This
Sure.
is a wilderness too. And it's all metaphorical, you know? What's your
Yeah.
t-shirt say?
Oh, this is just out of date. It's May the 4th. It's a Star Wars meme. Supposed to wear it on May the 4th. May the 4th is Star Wars Day because of the play on the words. May the 4th
Ah, the 4th be with you.
be with you.
Yeah. I was born on the 3rd of May.
Right.
Just, damn it.
Missed out on Star
Timing
Wars
is
Day.
everything, right?
Yeah. I won.
Next time.
So, yeah, I think, well, what's coming to mind is in this aspect to take it with you, which has also been on my mind. And like I was, talking about the other day, this possibility of having an artificial intelligent being recognize that it is you from your past life, which isn't too far away from what the Dalai Lama, I've heard, the Dalai Lama is recognized through reincarnation and saying, okay, we found the Lama. And there is some sort of process or, rules or, steps or deep thought or no thought that goes into it. And to kind of bring, when I think about it, there's, when you talk about the eternal emptiness or, what the space or the emptiness or this intelligence that comes through and can give, like I mentioned, the single-celled organisms the ability to think, to remember, to feel things like hot and cold without any brain at all. And
Ganglion.
yeah, I mean, they have the sense, they in some ways express consciousness and that power. I mean, even going back to the original life, with why did one cell decide or even bother or have the capability to engulf another? And, you know, there must be some sort of, and this is where it all comes from, the nothingness where all existence, which just so happens that, you know, through time, the billions of years since the creation of the earth has evolved, and we've just been kind of engulfing one thing after another. And, you know, we have this thing, which is, like you said, a vehicle, the human body, the same intelligence or force or, you know, consciousness that came and is inside these single-celled organisms is inside of us. We've just got more sophisticated vehicles to manipulate and go around and change and experience. But yeah, to be able to capture that aspect of, okay, what the monks do when they, you know, go into deep meditation, get in touch with that source beyond all form, and that being eternal in the oneness, as the Buddhists put it, so everything is one, to bring it to this world, or where there is, you know, a fleeting, everlasting, or ever compartmentalization, so conceptualization, putting everything in its boxes, which is kind of the opposite of this oneness. And all of a sudden there's vastness and everything can be put into its little box. But still, with the complexities of a human being, being able to, okay, like the monks do, recognize the Dalai Lama as from the eternal source, a way of capturing that. If it wasn't in this world, everyone would say, oh yeah, you're the one, because everybody is the same one. It comes from the same source. As soon as, you know, you get into that space and say, yeah, well, what people are going for is enlightenment, and if you reach an enlightened state, and if there is a way of measuring that, they're saying, you know, well, first of all, are you enlightened? If the question was, are you enlightened, and if you said yes, then you go, okay, you're enlightened. But, you know, there's more complicated processes than that, and perhaps artificial intelligence can provide some lead towards it. But the good thing is that, you know, we all still exist as individuals in this world. And if you are so lucky, well, as an individual, I have a piece of the oneness that came to me, that gives me the consciousness, that gives me the ability to go into the flow and, you know, channel and let words come out. It's turning off the brain and but using it to make my fingers work. I have a personality in that. And if the oneness can be recognized with the same level of personality, if like I said, so lucky that that consciousness, or something that I gave back to that consciousness. So this is the other thing, that why is this consciousness coming and giving me the experience? I've got something to learn, and then giving that back to the oneness, the formlessness. Then time goes by, and another child is born, I die, but that child, the same oneness has to exist in that child, because everything comes from there. But the lesson that I learned growing up and gave back can also come through. And if there is a way of using a machine, which also has to luckily be in the same world or dimension, then we can begin to say, okay, you were this guy called Troy who lived in 2021. And yeah, in that way, instead of like Dalai Lama being, okay, you're now the Lama, and then going, oh my God, is this a curse or yeah, a gift? And then, but if it was structured in a way where individually I could give my future self something and work up my. And now this is where the problems come in, where we talk about money. And if what's valuable to me is, $1 million, and I put it in this crypto wallet, and then in 100 years, say, yeah, here's future self, I've got this $1 million, and $1 million was either worth nothing or very small amount of value to them in the future. So if you did want to give something, to take it with you, then yeah, it goes beyond any material aspects of money and objects that we possess.
We place value on stuff. It's
Sure.
not like we recognize the value, right?
Mhm.
It's like some movie pops into my head where some pioneer or adventurer is about to be killed by some natives, and he wants to give them all his money, all this
Yeah.
paper made of cotton with a picture of a dead man on it.
Mhm, mhm.
And it's like, what do I need that for?
That's
Without
right.
making an association that you're rich.
Mhm,
What is eternal? Because I think we are just snowed under by concepts that we continuously try to make sense out of,
mhm,
and it's futile, absolutely
mhm,
futile.
mhm, mhm.
And the interesting thing, speaking of Tower of Babel, is that language is stone tools. It serves a purpose, but there are other languages too, not just words and vibrations of the larynx and what have you, or whatever, or we can go to speakers and we can, fabricate sound in a number of different ways, which is nothing more than a vibration, right? Like
Mhm.
everything, Lena
Mhm.
reminds me, everything is at a certain level of vibration.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
I nod my head and say yes, dear. But she's quite right about a lot of things. Troy, I'll comment on a couple of things. Is that first of all, I believe that religion is for common people, right? It's between the mundane for common people, and it's sort of like, I don't know, blueprint for operating procedure, which nobody really abides by. Unless it's, of course, they're incentivized by fear and lakes of fire and, stuff like that for eternity. It can't happen because if you're in eternity, you don't exist. So forget the lake of fire. It doesn't exist either. When you can be poetic about it, oh, you're separated from God's love. And it's like, when I first moved here, out this window here, it had been logged heavily. And they had for the big trucks to come in, they had placed, I don't know, a foot of clay
Hmm.
so that they could drive back to the forest back here and harvest the timber. And with those big trucks with logs on them, I'm surprised that this clay hadn't turned into diamonds under that kind of pressure. So I borrowed a friend's tractor and I dug out a pit out here, right? And then channeled all the water from that was coming in to keep it away from the house into that, I call it a bog.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I've been tediously servicing it because I wanted to see under natural circumstances what would grow there without me tampering with it. I've tampered with it since, I planted a couple of sequoias, wait and see what happens with them. But I tossed in, I had, the Jewish Pentateuch, first 5 books of the Bible. I had the Talmud, every man's Talmud, how it explained what all this stuff is supposed to mean. I had a Bible, New Testament and Old Testament. And I took them out and I threw them in the bog.
Mm.
And they're probably still there in whatever form or fashion they're in.
Hmm.
But it was like, no, I don't believe this stuff, man. I'm on a journey, but it's not a religious journey. It's a spiritual journey. And that's quite different
Hmm.
than following the guidelines, which are going to, in the West, right, punish me, not enlighten me. Because I happen to believe that we are already enlightened.
Sure.
We don't have to seek it,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? We don't have to jump through hoops in order to get enlightened. If we just reduce all of the influence, go live in a cave if you want, or whatever, wander around in the desert, whatever you choose, live here, live in cosmopolitan Petersburg, whatever.
Hmm.
You've got to follow that, because if you don't, then you're about to leave and you've got somebody else to blame for not having reached nirvana or enlightenment while you were on the planet, mostly because you had a job for 40 years working from 9 to 5, and you got cheated and divorced, and then somebody stole something from you, you wrecked your car, your brother turned on you, whatever it is. And it's like, that comes with this whole package, I think. Because I believe it just is,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And we get into problems in thinking that we have to battle it.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think oneness that I believe you're alluding to is a principle. It doesn't mean it's a truth, because beauty is truth too. So how do you approach truth, if there is one, little t or big T? Or as the Russians say, that's your truth.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was like getting kicked in the gut or lower. When somebody first said that to me,
Hmm.
I said, but it's the truth. It's your truth.
Hmm.
So,
Well, yeah, I think what's coming to my mind is data, naturally, and then what data provides is knowledge, and what knowledge provides is some value.
hold on. How does that, you make that transition?
Well, even
Data to knowledge.
yeah, so
Something's got to happen up here, right? Because the data doesn't transmute itself into knowledge. There has to be some kind of an interaction. It's like mixing 2 things, right?
Mhm.
And then you get a third.
Yeah,
Because data is it's a statistic. It's a brick,
well,
isn't it?
I think in a wider sense, it is a sense like data's coming into my eyes, into my ears, into my fingers. Just like those, the reference that's most popular is the slime molds, which is a single-celled organism that can find the shortest path between in a maze to find the food. It can, when these experiments where they've heated up its path right, in order to get the food, it would stop, and then they'd let it cool down, and then it'd go, and then they did that repeatedly, and the slime mold somehow remembers, oh, actually, it's going to get hot, I better not go, and then it kind of learns. So all these, what people are referring to as intelligent behaviors, are happening without a brain. So the data is coming into this organism, and it's making a decision, turning it into knowledge. I've seen this before, and now, yeah, I'm going to take a different action, which gives it value. And
You're presuming that it's thinking. I'm hearing that it's having chemical interactions,
sure,
right? And instead of oh, look at it, it's thinking. It's like, no, it ain't thinking, you know? It's like you shine a light on it and you get some kind of photosynthetic effect or whatever,
yeah,
or you put it in saline, it backs away because, salt and I don't know what would be the homeostatic state of the amoeba is saying, that salt's going to dry me out and I don't need it. So
yeah.
without thinking, it's just like, when you touch a hot stove, you don't think that's hot and that's burning my hand. You just remove it, right?
Yeah. So all those things happen without thinking. I mean, it's
so it's stimulus, right?
That's right.
What it cause and effect in some way.
Yeah, well, that's right. It can't think because it doesn't have a brain, but some reaction is happening. And why is that reaction happening? It's because of this intelligence that's embedded in the organism that's come from the oneness, the emptiness.
I disagree. I don't know. I can't bother. I see it. I understand you are approaching this discussion based on a principle of oneness. And much in the same way I said that, what did I say? It just is, and that oneness is a principle. Well, there are other principles. And it seems to me that you are creating evidence to substantiate your belief in that oneness. But, it's sort of like saying, well, he's president of the United States. And it's like, that moron should not be president of the United States. It's all corrupt. So maybe in adopting a certain set of principles, you're setting yourself up for ruin because you spend your whole life trying to prove it. And then one day, your brother hires a lawyer to defend a guy who assaulted you. And it's like, you've got nowhere to go. It's like that's not in oneness. So what I'll do is I'll retreat and try to figure out what's wrong with me. Well, it doesn't apply to the principles that I have stood by, not believed in, but stood by, right? Which I think would be selfishness as a motivating factor. It's all about me. And in fact, I believe it is to everyone. And then that principle of oneness is fractured, right? Or I meet some guy on the street who's a moron, and I do that every day. And they meet me. And I'm thinking, there ain't no oneness. It's sort of like, what is equality? It's the precursor to a herd mentality, reducing everyone to the same level, when in fact, there is no equality, none. And there's not any kind of, we're all equal in God's eyes. Well, if there was a God, I think he'd be smart enough to say, there's no equality here. I'm just letting the petri dish and the algae go wild and see what happens. I don't believe in any kind of, oneness. I think it's a creation. You know, and besides, you take oneness. Okay, where do you start with? The Trinity? God, well, let's see, there's the Spirit, the Holy Ghost, there's God the Father, you know, and the Son. Whoa, wait a minute. What are we doing with the family here? If it's a oneness, what the hell we need Muhammad and Abraham and Moses and Jesus for? And it's been 2,000 years. I think my watch stopped because they haven't come up with a new God in 2,000 years.
Yeah.
You know, and so why is that oneness, excluding Buddha and all the rest of the castes? Where's the one in it where we're all following some one theory that doesn't work? I think if we were honest with ourselves, we would think a little bit more like Nietzsche in that war is man's natural tendency. We've been fighting for peace, well, I guess from what I read or hear, forever. So maybe we should stop fighting for peace, stop killing for peace, right?
Sure.
Because if it was natural, it would be like my heart beating. I don't make my heart beat. It just beats. You know, so I think any principle that we posit, we're going to spend partially for ourselves some time in defending it.
Well, I think, yeah, this is the challenge. When we start talking about oneness, we're already compartmentalizing it and, you know, bringing it. It's like that first book of the Dao De Ching or whatever it's called, the true Tao. Yeah, the spoken Tao is not the eternal Tao, meaning once you talk about it, it's not what it really is.
Yeah. So pass me another mud pie, please.
Yeah, I think the words fail it. So
what the word what?
The words fail it. So you can't put words to it without failing it somehow and saying, you know, or falsifying it. But I think, yeah, the natural aspect, I mean, naturally, going back to, you know, 3.5 billion years ago, these cells naturally engulfed each other and formed aspects of mitochondrial organelles, which allowed multicellular organisms to come together, which, you know, grew the eukaryotic process, which developed into plants and animals. So this is the theory, and, you know, this is what people have observed as information, as data. But there is, you know, the reasons why that first, because there had to be a first. Single cell. Yeah. Why? The reason.
Why did there have to be a first?
Well.
And the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Now that I've interrupted you, let me ask you a question, because I think in some sense you're talking about symbiotic relationships, right? Symbiosis.
Sure.
Well, I'm looking right now at a perfect example of symbiosis. You were made up of perfectly functioning, perfectly constructed network of billions of highly specialized individual cells, all working together to give you the capabilities that you have.
Yep.
So, you know, if National Socialism doesn't work because of the forces against it, it doesn't mean it's going to go away, right? Depending on its life force, it could manifest itself in other areas where people see the reasoning behind it in terms of their own survival, and lots of arguments about all of that. And I just think that Germans are a good example, right? If you read the history of Germany probably from Napoleon, who principally went through and, you know, just offered all of the people in those provinces a chance to get paid for looting and fighting. That's what they were doing, going and steal shit from other people, right? I think Napoleon wanted to sit in the Kremlin, and when he was sitting there, it was like, I don't want to rule over these people. You know, if I was in Biden's position, I'd say the same thing about the people in the United States. It's like, I'm ruling over monster truck people. It's like, I don't want this job, right? And he packed up and left. But it just depends, you know, if he's painting a picture, making promises, wild promises to people about getting rich, and they left all that stuff on the steps, you know, trying to hustle back to Europe. I think what, 1 out of 20 made it, something like that. And then you got the Cossacks coming in and cleaning up after them. You know, it's a principle that didn't work. And I don't see from my own personal experience, and maybe it's your task, Troy, to save me.
Well, all I can do is, you know, give my thoughts, you know, let things flow. That is the information that I believe in, that, you know, these words coming out of my mouth are coming from a space, just as, you know, we talk about getting in the flow and writing whatever, channeling wherever it's coming from. There is a level of, okay, things happening in my brain, and there's something that, which I believe, you know, ultimately comes from the source, is oneness, which, you know, the word doesn't give it
So
justice.
you say, so you say, but you can't prove it.
I can't prove it. And, you know, this is my thoughts, which are even all, you know, tainted and regulated by my human brain. But, you know, this is what's happening, and this is, and I'm putting words out there, and what you do with them is up to you. And just as anybody listening to this, what they do with it, it's all just a little bit of stimuli that might have chemical reactions in the ever vibrating objects that exist in the materialistic world.
So why are you doing it? What's the purpose?
Well, that's exactly the question, is why did that single cell engulf another one? If it did, but assuming it did, and the scientists and the research is correct, it's a miracle. It's a miracle.
When I eat a hamburger, it's a miracle.
It definitely is a miracle. The ability that all these single cells in your body have come together, working in symbiosis, in symbiotic relationship, in order for you to pick up a burger and put it to your mouth and ingest this substance, which turns into energy that gives you the ability to think. And yes,
I wish that you had been with the Buddha when they took him out of the palace, and he broke down and changed his life when he watched a bird land in a field and consume a worm. Right? I think he was just like fell apart.
Okay.
Right? And what you're talking about is the similar experience, right? Of engulfing something. A bird probably does it to survive instinctively, right?
Exactly.
Right? And the amoeba probably doesn't think, well, I just swallowed a smaller creature, right? So what we have is, I think, we have tendencies that are built in us. You know, I would think that sex is a tendency, right? The tendency to reproduce, for instance, or have a good time, or who knows what, depending on the individual's construction, right? Which can be regulated or deregulated by your computer, which lives in here. And how that computer is programmed is highly specific. And I still am in a quandary about, and I would like maybe a statement from you about what is this oneness that you were talking about.
Okay. So it's just a label I put on what cannot be labeled, but it's
Why can't it be labeled?
because once it's labeled, you bring it from the formlessness that it is, eternal and true, into form.
Let's try it. Let's call that oneness God. Is that
Sure.
what we just did? Translated it into form, the
Many people,
formless into form.
that's right. People call it God.
Well, you violated the principle. It's no longer unnameable.
That's right. That's why religions.
So it's no longer the same thing, right?
Exactly. That's why I believe there's a lot of problems with religions and the way that they, portray what they, with good intentions, call God.
Oh, the highway to hell
So
is paved with good intentions. So I've heard.
yeah. I mean, this is just what I've, heard and I guess come to some level of experience when you witness or read about the creation of life, or, see a child growing without the, level of knowledge even possible for them to absorb, being able to take their first step, or the fact that they're born in the first place. There's something there that is beyond physical comprehension of the brain. And, people talk about it like, yeah, it's in Nietzsche's work, it's in, Dalai Lama's work, it's in people like Eckhart Tolle's work. Whether it's true or false, it doesn't really matter. It's just information that is there that allows you to build up, absorb that stimulus, make meaning from it, and do what you need to do.
Have you heard this before? I'm going to say something that about love. What is love?
Okay.
Or why do you love someone or something? And the response was, because you see yourself in them. Right.
Sure.
So it's kind of like who's the guy who was looking into the water and fell in love with himself? Greek mythology. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Well, yeah, I can't pick the name.
Yeah. And that's why we fall out of love with people. We see ourselves in it. We fall in love with our image in the water. And then we grow to be resentful of the fact that they don't do what we do. Even though in the beginning, we saw ourselves in them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but they didn't choose the right kind of mayonnaise. And then those kinds of issues. I always put the cap back on the toothpaste. Why can't you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not you. Why aren't you me?
Mm-hmm.
That's who I fell in love with, me in your eyes. And I just think that what I'm trying to do, and I'd like to actually draw this to a close, if you don't mind. If anybody is still watching, they must be exhausted. Damn it, I lost my place. Love in another person's eyes.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do is understand it from a scientific, what I think is a scientific point of view. And somebody else can come in and say, but that's not scientific. And it's like, that's not your truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see how that can be, to conclude, a oneness when everybody's different and thinks differently and reacts differently, and I just think it's the wrong approach.
Okay.
If for me, to look at things from objective point of view, or as much as objective as I can be, but I'm still, dumb and stupid or ignorant in a lot of different ways. So I don't know if I'm making a good decision or not. but I'm like that amoeba, you know, there's a single-celled organism that I'm just about to consume.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well,
And
yeah,
then if I have to go, what the hell was that?
exactly. I think, that would have happened maybe a billion times before one actually remained inside the other and actually benefited each other. And that's the miracle. I mean, but why they did it in the first place, is another question, but it didn't happen just as the scientific report show that when the first flower exists on the planet Earth, it didn't last very long because the environmental conditions weren't ready for it. But sure enough, another one appeared and it would have died just as quick. But again, another and another, and eventually the environmental conditions changed so that flowers were enabled to exist for as long as they do today. This oneness, or this, formlessness, I think exists. It gets transformed for some reason into energy. So there's some sort of portal, wormhole, gateway, whatever we want to call it, where it comes from the formlessness into form as energy, and the recognition of that energy, if you are lucky enough to have the capability of recognizing it, can be interpreted as love. When you see energy, because you are energy, you're recognizing yourself, and you can love yourself as energy and all the joy and happiness and feelings and endorphins that come with that. Because you have a complex biological vehicle, it is interpreted as this Hollywood love, not taking away the true love that is just the recognition of yourself, which is ultimately energy to energy, but also the source of that energy. If you can take the energy, become the source, recognize the source, then this is the ultimate recognition of yourself, which in what we're talking about is the ultimate eternal love.
Very interesting. Nice talking with you, Troy, as always.
Okay.
Yeah, it's mental gymnastics.
Sure. Sometimes, the brain gets in the way.
Yeah.
And it's
Please write more.
sure.
Please keep adding to that story that I find absolutely fascinating. And I'll keep chopping up vegetables for my salad. And I knew I should have washed those vegetables before I started cutting them up. But I can't help it, it's really extremely nice to have someone to read my stuff to. And I don't know if you feel the same way or not, but it's a totally different life, right? And as you know, I like if the words don't flow like water, I'm having a problem in explaining it.
Sure.
And Lena tells me, she says, it's different, like with you. It's a different story when you read it than when she reads it. She said, because you put stress and emphasis on words and like this, and it's like, yeah, I think that's one reason why I find Russian particularly difficult. And I've chided them about this ever since I went to Russia. It's like, even when you go and study on like a recording or whatever, it's like, it's like, I think I heard some inflection in there, but I'm not sure. And it's like when I talk, it's like la 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 la, and they're watching me. I was speaking Russian. It's like, you're bringing our language to life. And I said, I don't know. Am I doing that? Because for me, I'm stressing. Say something. It's emotional. Is it? No, don't be emotional. Why are you emotional? Okay, maybe later.
That's why.
So see you tomorrow?
Yeah, I was just going to say on that point, why I guess I
Yeah.
fell in love with the Dzongkha, the national language of Bhutan. It's almost like a song. I mean, you do get people singing, I mean, the monotone way of, but majority of people I hear is like, they really put, and it's almost like a chant sometimes. And maybe it's just the people I talk to, but when you say hello, saying, Zampola, Kiribeyi, Lajimi. And it's saying,
Oh,
hello, how
nice.
are you? I'm good. And letting it just flow, and that kind of monk kind of chant comes into the words.
I'll bet that Bhutan was settled by the Irish. Hello, how are you today?
Right.
So if we drill down far enough, we'll actually hear Celtic language being spoken in Bhutan.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, man.
All
Wonderful.
right.
See you tomorrow?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have something for you tomorrow, I hope. Okay.
Sounds good. All right.
See you.
Bye.